Welcome back to Jerusalem Minute here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. I'm here in studio with Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. Alex, a lot to discuss on this week's episode.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, my man. An Iranian attack is imminent, according to sources. Iran's supreme leader has instructed the country's National Security Council to prepare for another assault on Israel. That is the latest. The attack would probably be launched after the U.S. election. And the logic the Iranians have is that if they launch an attack against Israel before the elections, perhaps more people would be willing to elect President Donald Trump once again to office, thinking that he's a strong leader and people will most likely vote for him. That is the logic according to these sources. Alex.
Well, I think that the election does factor into Iran's thinking. They could launch an attack before the election. And about a week ago, there were rumors that Iran might launch an attack before the election. But I think they do want to see who's going to win the election. There's a lot of parallels here between what's going on today and 1979, 1980 election with, when President Carter was going out and President Ronald Reagan was coming in. Remember that the revolutionaries took over the U.S. embassy inside Tehran, and they were trying to negotiate to get these hostages out. And sure enough, the very day that Ronald Reagan was supposed to be inaugurated into office, those hostages in the embassy were released. And I think the same thing's going on over here. Iran, understanding that the regime is possibly about to change in the United States, and they're waiting to see what the results are. I think they feel very comfortable. If Harris is elected, then it's more of the same for Iran, and the same things that they were able to get away with. They were able to get away with before. They're going to be able to get away with after. Donald Trump is not necessarily going to put up with the same antics, the same results from the Iranians. And so I think if Trump wins, there's less of a chance that Iran will strike. But we don't know what's inside the heads of the Ayatollahs, and they may launch a strike regardless. And they may decide that if Trump becomes the president, that they're going to war and it's their job to defeat America if Trump becomes the president, as opposed to working some way with the Harris regime in order to get back into some kind of a JCPOA nuclear deal. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we have seen more and more reports, like in the New York Times, that Iran apparently has decided that they want to retaliate for Israel's strike on just last Saturday against the Iranian missile defenses and missile production systems facilities, potentially one of the secret nuclear facilities unreported in Parchin. In others, the feeling is that Israel's hit was too big to ignore, and that they can't ignore it, and that they're going to attack. And then the question is, what does that attack look like? Reports saying that the attack could be larger than the October 1st barrage of 200 ballistic missiles or 180 ballistic missiles. And it could also originate from other places, like specifically from Iraq, some reports are saying. And Israel's already seen some unidentified unmanned aerial vehicles coming from Iraq, and some missiles fired from Iraq. And that would change the response from Israel. And the question is, what will Israel do, right? Will Israel allow Iran to strike first? Will Israel preempt an Iranian strike the same way that Israel preempted what was supposed to be a Lebanese Hezbollah strike? After Israel took out Hassan Nasrallah, that Hezbollah wanted to retaliate, and they were just getting set to launch a massive missile barrage at Israel at 5 a.m. And Israel swooped in, and in the hour before Hezbollah was about to launch its attack, so Israel swooped in with dozens of planes and hit all of the launch points. And so the question is, where does this war go next? The ball's in Iran's court. Israel can, preempt. We have to see what happens. Everybody waiting to see what's going to take place on Wednesday, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, number one, I would argue that as much as Iran might not like Trump, they certainly respect him much more than they do Harris. That's for sure, in my opinion. Number two, and perhaps an even greater threat than what we're talking about now, another potential ballistic missile attack or drone attack, is the fact that Iran might already be nuclear, according to one of their chief advisors, an advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei. His name is Kamal Kharazi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said, we now have the technical capabilities necessary to produce nuclear weapons, threatening Israel, that if Israel takes Tehran to the brink, that they won't hesitate and launch nuclear weapons.
في حال تعرضت إيران لتهديد وجودي فإننا سوف نغير سياسة عقيدتنا النووية. هذا الأمر لا زال مطروحا. نحن الآن نملك القدرات الفنية اللازمة لإنتاج السلاح النووي، وليس لدينا مشكلة في ذلك، وإن فتوى قائد الثورة هي فقط التي تمنع ذلك.
We've been talking about nuclear weapons. Israel has for years and years. Prime Minister Netanyahu, for many, many years, decades even, has warned of the threat of a nuclear Iran. Now you have this high-level advisor in Tehran actually saying that Iran might already have nuclear weapons. I mean, that would lead me to think that Israel will have to, whether it's alone, whether it's with the help of the U.S., and we see the other U.S. Military personnel and airplanes and whatnot arriving here in the region, B-52s. But this might be a situation. If you're talking about nuclear, I mean, that is the end game. Israel would have to take them out.
This is what we've been talking about for years. Okay?
Yeah.
Netanyahu has been talking about this for, close to 2 decades. The Iranian nuclear threat. And remember, it wasn't so long ago that people were saying, no, the nuclear is not for military use. It's not for weapons. It's for civilian use, right? Okay. Everybody was wrong. Okay. They were either wrong because they were completely naive and negligent, or they were intentionally just allowing Iran to get to the threshold of nuclear weapon. And this is the first time you actually have a high-ranking Iranian official basically threatening to use nuclear weapon, whether or not they have it or they don't. If they don't have it, they're right on the cusp of having it. And this should have been the red line for the entire international community. You should hear the United States, every Western European country now losing it over this threat, and all of them coming together and saying, that's it. You've gone too far. We will not let you threaten the region with nuclear weapons. Okay. Israel never threatens the region with its nuclear weapons. Okay. United States doesn't threaten other countries with its nuclear weapons. Okay. When you're threatening with nuclear weapons, that's the red line.
And has anybody said anything over the last 24
Yeah.
48
You know
hours?
what the United States said? They said to Iran, they said that we don't think that Iran should respond to Israel's last attack. And if they do respond, okay, then we won't be able to hold Israel back from another response.
But if they respond with nuclear weapons, that's it. There's no Israeli response. I mean,
exactly. I mean, it's an existential
an end
threat,
game.
But the idea that you're saying that you won't hold Israel back, first of all, we know it's not true, because they will try to hold Israel back, as they've tried every single time to hold Israel back. Now, Israel's gone through those red lights and has struck, even though the United States has tried to hold it back. But at the same time, we note that in the last attack that Israel only hit military targets. They did not hit the oil infrastructure. They did not hit the nuclear infrastructure. Why didn't they hit those? Because Joe Biden said to Israel, don't hit the nuclear infrastructure, don't hit the oil infrastructure, okay? And don't do it before the election. And Israel caved in to that and only hit military targets. Now, the military targets it hit, those were important military targets to hit for a first strike, and it's good that Israel hit those. But could the strike have been much more intensive? Could it have hit Iran really where it hurts? Yes, it could have. So they did hold Israel back, and they would probably try to hold Israel back yet again. And at the same time, the United States shouldn't be saying, and I guess we've said this in previous rounds, that they shouldn't be saying, if you attack, we won't be able to hold Israel back from retaliating. They should say at this point, after sending the largest ballistic missile barrage in the history of modern warfare and threatening nuclear weapons, to use nuclear weapons next time, they should be saying, if you fire even a firefly, a mosquito at Israel, a Qassam rocket, anything, it's going to be considered as though you've hit an ally of the United States, and we stand together with the state of Israel. And if you attack them, you're attacking us. That's what they should be saying. And they're not saying it. They're not saying it yet, by the way, because I still think that there is a very real possibility that the way this thing escalates, and almost regardless of who becomes the president on Tuesday or Wednesday this week, I do think that there remains a very significant possibility that if this war continues to escalate, that the United States will become involved in it, simply because Iran has destabilized an entire region. Okay, it's not just that they've been firing direct against a neighbor of theirs, Israel. Iran is not next to Israel. Okay, there are several countries in between Iran and Israel. And so Iran has systematically destabilized Iraq, destabilized Syria, destabilized all of Lebanon, destabilized Yemen, destabilized Gaza, and used all of those countries that it has been funding terror operations inside Gaza, Lebanon, all of them to attack Israel. Okay. And now Israel's been attacking back. Israel's been attacking in Gaza. Israel's been attacking in Lebanon. The United States and Israel both attacked in Yemen. Okay. Israel's been striking inside Syria. Israel has struck back against Iran directly. Okay. So you have an entire regional war going on over here because Iran has been the number one exporter of terrorism. They've destabilized the entire region, and the United States' job is to restore peace and order in the region. And they've also, let's not forget, Iran has been hitting American installations also. Iran is threatening America also. These threats about the nuclear weapons, it's not only about Israel. They're saying Israel and America are going to get hit with these things. That's in the quotes that these individuals are saying. So they're threatening, they're hitting Israel. They're threatening the United States as well. I think that there's a significant possibility that whether or not any president wants to get involved with Iran, and none of them do. Okay, I don't think Trump wants to get involved in a military confrontation with Iran. I think the last thing that Harris is thinking about is a military confrontation with Iran. If this thing continues to go the way it's going and it's clear that this is escalating, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of America getting involved.
And it'll be a very interesting 3-month period there between the actual election and when the new president becomes inaugurated in January. And we'll have to see what plays out there. In the meantime, turning our attention to Lebanon, the IDF said Saturday it estimates some 1,500 Hezbollah operatives have been killed by ground troops and an airstrike since the start of the ground offensive in southern Lebanon a month ago. Also, at the same time, just on Saturday alone, 130 rockets fired at Israel, 10 drones targeted the country. Unfortunately, you had 7 people, killed, 3 Israelis, along with 4 Thai workers fatally killed on Thursday. And more people, I think, injured today as well, as the rockets are still raining down here. And I can feel the pulsating sensation from my cell phone in my pocket, indicating that more red alerts are going off in the north. The war still continues, even though there was some talk of a potential ceasefire over the past week. It doesn't look like we're anywhere near a ceasefire as the war goes on, rages in the north.
Right. The Biden administration sent their envoy, Amos Hak. I guess he's officially the energy envoy, but he's been the one who's always been involved in negotiating between Israel and Hezbollah, essentially between Israel and Lebanon. Remember, he was the one that brokered the deal that Yair Lapid signed when he was a caretaker prime minister for a period of less than 6 months and shouldn't have had any authority to do this under the law, but was protected by the Supreme Court. That's a whole other story. But he basically signed over a natural gas reserve that was in disputed territorial waters over to Lebanon and changed the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon to make it such that this disputed gas field would be in Lebanon's territorial
waters. And that was supposed to bring peace, right?
And we were told at the time that and the reason why we were told that Lapid had to do this and why the court wouldn't intervene is because it was a national security issue. And we were told that we did this in order to avoid an all-out war with Hezbollah. Okay, that this was done. So first of all, like you're paying a bribe over to Hezbollah not to attack you. But here, less than 2 years later, we're in one of the most massive conflicts with Hezbollah that we've ever been in. So this was a disaster by Lapid, but it was also a disaster by Hasten. Hasten's now trying to negotiate a ceasefire between who and who. I'm not even sure. Okay, who runs Hezbollah? Like we we don't even know what kind of influence Hasten would have. He's probably trying to negotiate with the Lebanese government, who doesn't have any control over Hezbollah. And basically what they're talking about is some kind of a ceasefire where the new reality is the October 6th reality, which is UN Resolution 1701, which means that UNIFIL forces, UN peacekeepers are basically going to guarantee somehow that Hezbollah doesn't rearm the south of Lebanon. And we should note that Israel has cleared out much of southern Lebanon. I've heard reports that as much as 80% of southern Lebanon has been cleared out. Okay, we keep learning about this. We don't have as much information on what the IDF is doing day to day inside Lebanon as we did in the early months of the war between Israel and Hamas and Gaza. There was a lot more direct reporting. Here, there's a bit more ambiguity about what's actually happening, but Israel's been clearing out southern Lebanon. Reports from Golan that Israel has taken out as much as 80% of Hezbollah's long-range rocket capability, which is extraordinarily impressive. And there's been reports that it could be that even within 2 to 3 weeks' time that Israel's limited ground operation could be over. I don't really see how that's possible. I don't think that that's what's going to happen, but there are different frameworks now talking about a 60-day framework toward a permanent ceasefire. You know, I don't really see that happening. I think that Israel is just playing along the diplomatic game that the United States is presenting. And they've been doing this throughout the entire war now for over a year. You know, the United States comes in, they say, hey, we want a ceasefire in Gaza. Okay, so Israel says, okay, you want a ceasefire in Gaza? We'll send a negotiating team for a ceasefire. We want back the hostages. Every time Israel does that, what they're doing is they're basically trying to buy time and they're trying to buy permission for the next action. So if they, play along this game, for a bit, we'll have to see what happens afterwards. I mean, it's unfortunate even that Israel has to play, but this is the reality. Meanwhile, it seems as though while we happen to be losing soldiers on a regular basis and missiles still come in and drones still come in, and we haven't figured it all out yet, that, we've been filing down most of Hezbollah's capabilities and destroying Iran's number one proxy, which is Hezbollah.
Yeah, you said we don't know everything, but something we definitely do know, and I saw the video last night, it was pretty unbelievable. An Israeli naval commandos captured a senior Hezbollah naval official in a raid in northern Lebanon. We're talking about 87 miles, 140 kilometers away from Israel's border. Just unbelievable. They came via the sea. They came in these dinghies and these boats. They stormed the beaches of Lebanon and they captured one senior figure here. They brought him back for interrogation. Hopefully we're going to find out a lot of information about how the Hezbollah Navy operates, what they do. You mentioned the gas rig. I mean, these are the areas they're out there carrying out or launching these terror attacks from, those exact areas. So this was a big catch here.
A very impressive raid, and just demonstrates that Israel has numerous tactics, numerous strategies for taking out the top leadership of Hamas, of Hezbollah. We have to see if they have similar strategies in place for taking out some of the leadership of the IRGC and perhaps some of the Ayatollahs. I don't know. Everything should be on the table, especially after Iran and Hezbollah sent a drone that hit Netanyahu's house in Caesarea. So, everything should be on the table. But a very impressive strike. It's one that's kind of blown over a little bit as Israel and the United States are moving toward this election day and this Iranian threat. But, the long arm of Israel doing its job inside Lebanon, another stunning success, along with, taking out Fuad Shukr, hitting Hassan Nasrallah, now taking out this naval commander and, of course, the pagers and the beepers and, all that kind of stuff. So it's been a good ride so far from the IDF, despite absorbing some significant losses.
Yeah, painful losses, but we are certainly winning, I believe, on all fronts. And turning now to the Palestinian Authority, you're going to have to help me with this one. I don't understand this fully, okay? I don't understand why Israel's doing what it's doing. And I'm referring to reports this week about Israel preventing the PA from collapsing before the U.S. election. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich will extend a waiver allowing Israeli banks to do business with their Palestinian so-called counterparts in Judea and Samaria for 1 month, officials in Jerusalem told local media this past week. So the Palestinian Authority incites to violence, incites terrorism, has a pay-to-slay program. They're just as bad as Hamas, in my opinion. They wear suits. Hamas wears
two sides of the same coin.
Sweatpants or whatever, what have you. Two sides of the same coin. Yet Israel went ahead and signed this waiver, extending a deal for another 30 days, receiving backing from the Security Cabinet against the backdrop of the upcoming U.S. presidential election. So why would Israel keep the Palestinian Authority afloat? And what's the connection with the U.S. election? I'm not fully understanding why we would do that. I mean, if it was up to me, I'd say the PA would send them on a one-way ticket out of here. Well, I don't know, about 25 years ago or so.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a little bit of background. You're right. The Palestinian Authority, they literally pay salaries. This is on the books. As much as 7% of the Palestinian budget, it could be much more than that, goes to pay the salaries of those who were arrested and are sitting in Israeli prisons for committing acts of terror, attempting first-degree murder, in some cases committing first-degree murder against Israelis, and they get a stipend for sitting in Israeli jails.
And their families do as well. They're supported.
The families are supported. And in the case where somebody is killed, a Palestinian terrorist is killed in the act of trying to commit first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder or first-degree murder, then the families also receive stipends for life. Okay. And the longer somebody sits in the Israeli jail, the higher the stipend is.
And the more Israelis they murder, the higher the stipend.
So the United States Congress actually passed an act called the Taylor Force Act, which prevents the United States from sending funding to the Palestinian Authority for the documented funds that are going over to Palestinian terrorists and families of martyrs. Okay. Now, this, by the way, I should mention just as an aside, this, Sander Gerber was I think the driving force behind this law in the United States. And then he turned around and he said, how could it be that the United States now has a law to prevent funds from moving over to the Palestinian Authority from the United States when Israel, as part of the Oslo Accords, actually transfers monies over to the Palestinian Authority? It does that because of taxes and customs that it collects at the Israeli ports of entry for goods, because those ports, like every car that's in the Palestinian Authority right now, and the Palestinians are driving around nice new cars just like everybody else. What port do those come in, right? They come in the Haifa port, they come in the Ashdod port. And so Israel collects customs taxes on behalf of the Palestinian Authority as part of the Oslo Accords agreement, and it transfers those monies over to the Palestinian Authority. So Israel actually passed a law which said that it's no longer allowed to give funds. At least it has to offset the funds that it can prove are given to the terrorists and the martyrs. It should not send those funds across. So Israel's been looking for loopholes. The United States wants money to go across to the Palestinian Authority, because if Israel stops facilitating the transfer of funds over the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian Authority budget's going to collapse. Okay. If the Palestinian Authority is one of the largest employers in the Palestinian territories, Palestinian controlled territories. And if they're unable to pay salaries, so there could be uprisings. Okay. And if the Palestinian Authority doesn't govern over the Palestinian people, so who does? Right. So the United States has been begging Israel time after time, month after month, to pass waivers to continue to move funds over to the Palestinian Authority. We saw just last week, Israel passed a law forbidding the operations of UNRWA inside Israel, which is going to make it very difficult for them to operate inside Gaza, even though technically maybe they can still operate inside Gaza because Gaza is not sovereign Israeli territory. It's going to make it near impossible for them to operate in Judea and Samaria, and it's going to make it completely impossible for them to operate like they do already in Jerusalem. And this is the next logical step, right? This is the axis that funds, governs, incites to terrorism inside all of the Palestinian-controlled territories. It's Hamas, it's UNRWA, it's the Palestinian Authority. Now, the United States just wanted Israel and is still pushing Israel to pass a 1-year waiver to allow these funds to continue to go over to the Palestinian Authority. Israel has said no to that, but in deference to the upcoming election, they have said that they would pass a 1-month waiver, and they will reassess it in a month. I'm glad that they didn't go with the full year. The last waiver that they signed was for 4 months. So this waiver is only for 1 month. So it's certainly a step in the right direction. The UNRWA passage of the bill was a step in the right direction. We have to see what happens next. But not only should it be that the Palestinian Authority doesn't come in to run the Gaza Strip after this war ends, but I think some significant questions about the overall legitimacy of the Palestinian Authority and whether they can be or should be considered a reliable partner or entity, even if not a partner, to run the Palestinian affairs in these territories. I think that we're moving towards a place where you're going to see increasing Israeli presence, increasing Israeli responsibility, increasing Israeli sovereignty over the territories as Hamas, UNRWA, and maybe soon the Palestinian Authority all lose their ability to operate.
I get it now. Thank you for that. Now I understand it. I still don't like it, but now I get it. And by
hopefully
the way,
it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, hopefully it is. It just hurts to see, giving the PA any sort of grace, even if it's a 1 month waiver. At the same time, by the way, the Israeli Knesset passes the 2025 state budget. Just to touch on that, which is a sign of stability. When you don't pass a budget, a state budget in Israel, the government collapses. So that didn't happen. The budget was passed, and now we can move forward and I guess focus more on the war on 7 fronts now.
Yeah, and it's just amazing that the prime minister is operating, as the chief diplomatic officer. He's operating as the chief military officer here, and there's also politics. We saw was just several weeks ago that he actually strengthened his coalition by bringing Gideon Sa'ar and several of the former Likud defectors who had moved over to Benny Gantz back into the government, giving Israel a strong and sturdy 68-member, completely right-wing government. This was the government that Israel should have had from the beginning of the election. It's a legitimate and completely right-wing government. It's the first time in history you've had like a significant majority right-wing government, an exclusively right-wing government at that. So, kudos to the prime minister for putting that together. And passing the budget is a strong indication that the prime minister is not resigning, that we're not going to an early election. And people aren't even talking about that. They're not even talking anymore about an early election. The stunt that Benny Gantz pulled by joining the unity government and then resigning from the unity government, trying to trigger an early election, that's not happening. The next election is not even scheduled until November of 2026. Okay. Yeah. And the prime minister has a strong government, a functioning government. They're passing the budgets. Of course, the opposition is slamming the budgets. But that's the job of the opposition. That's what they're supposed to do. And the prime minister just keeps going on all fronts, diplomatic, military, political at the same time.
Turning our attention now to Gaza, the war continues down there. Soldiers from the 5th Brigade located an underground tunnel route within the civilian population, once again using civilians as human shields near Zaytun, containing a Hamas weapons manufacturing facility. Also, they found gear that perhaps terrorists were going to use to try to infiltrate Israel through the sea. That's one story out of Gaza. And secondly, we brought it up last week because it was one of the top stories, the negotiations between Israel and Qatar with Egypt and Hamas, I guess indirectly in terms of a potential hostage deal. Hamas has once again, surprise, surprise, rejected the latest proposal by Israel to a temporary halt. Hamas says, no, we will not agree to a temporary halt. We won't release the hostages. We want the war to come to an end. And Israel, of course, insists the war cannot end until Hamas is no longer a threat to the state of Israel. And just yesterday, Hamas firing rockets once again at communities in southern Israel. So we're at a stalemate once again. Not surprising at all, but unfortunately, 101 Israelis alive. And again, very sadly,
I don't know if 101 are alive. 101 are missing.
101 are missing alive and perhaps not alive, unfortunately, still being held by Hamas in Gaza. So stalemate on that front.
Well, we keep getting every few weeks, this renewed hope, or, the United States says that there's new hope for a hostage deal. This war could end immediately if Hamas would return the hostages. They could have returned the hostages in the first week. We wouldn't have had this year-long war. Okay. Anybody that says that what's happening inside the Gaza Strip is terrible, what Israel's doing, Israel has got no choice but to take out all the terror infrastructure, which includes these tunnels, which includes all the rockets, includes all these assault rifles, includes all the leadership and the commanders of Hamas and the organized battalions and these newly reformed battalions that are merging themselves together and trying to find the hostages. The second Hamas decides that it's been enough and they want to see rebuilding, they can release whatever hostages are left. That includes live hostages, includes bodies of hostages. They can lay down their arms and say, we're done shooting against you. And the second they do that, the war is going to be over. But it's clear that Hamas has decided, they're in it until the end. And of course, there's a lot of people out there that want this war to be over, and they just want Israel to stop the war, even if the hostages aren't back, just saying Israel's done enough already. And it's interesting that even Bill Clinton seems to have maybe come around to the Israeli position, at a campaign stop where he was campaigning for Kamala Harris in Michigan this week. He said, quote, "I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. But if you lived in one of those kibbutzim in Israel right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, the most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza, and Hamas butchered them." And he continued, "The people who criticize Israel's response are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in retaliation. How many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize what you would do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians, and one day they come for you and slaughter the people in your village. You would say, you have to forgive me, but I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't how many we've had to kill, because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded by civilians. They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself." And, if you think that was interesting, you should listen to this part here that Bill Clinton said about the original peace process that he helped broker during the Oslo Accords with Yasser Arafat. Let's listen to that clip.
And the only time Yasser Arafat didn't tell me the truth was when he promised me he was going to accept the peace deal that we had worked out, which would have given the Palestinians a state on 96% of the West Bank and 4% of Israel, and they got to choose where the 4% of Israel was. And I think part of it is that Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was, their faith existed, they were there. In the time of King David, and the southernmost tribes had Judea and Samaria.
And also interesting that Clinton is stating this at a Kamala Harris rally just right ahead of the election. I think it's going to be a very consequential election, not just for the United States, certainly for the state of Israel. We see here that approximately 2/3 of Israelis prefer to see Trump back in the White House. Probably the majority of Jews in America are going to vote for Kamala Harris, even though probably Trump will get more votes from Jews than in any of the recent elections. But Israel's certainly waiting to see what the outcome of this election is going to be. I think that it's going to have a very big impact on the tactics and the strategy that Israel's going to take, both in regards to the local wars it's fighting with Hamas and Hezbollah, and certainly with regards to this emerging nuclear threat with the head of the terror octopus, which is Iran. Praying for good results for the United States, for the state of Israel, whatever that result is going to be, and certainly praying for Israel to have the wisdom to operate with whoever becomes the president of the United States to get the most out of whatever the situation is, and to improve and increase its position here in the Middle East and in the entire world.
And that's all the time we have for today. Big shout out to Zach Sickerman, producer Ryan Lifshitz, who's back behind the controls. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News here on JNS TV, along with Alex Traiman, CEO of JNS. Make sure you lock it in to JNS TV, also jns.org, for all the latest and breaking news from the state of Israel and the Jewish world. Thanks so much. Have a great week, everybody.